G obviously stands for genealogy. Next to archaeology, this is definitely one of the most prominent concepts associated with your work.
Well, it's basically quite simple. Archaeology investigates the internal rules according to which a certain discourse functions. For example, the discourse of modern psychiatry. The concrete object is then the verbal and pictorial utterances that are made in this field while at the same time determining it. In contrast, genealogy takes a step back and examines the external conditions, the social practices, and the power relations that have produced and shaped the discourse.
In the discourse of psychiatry, for example, that would be institutions like the asylum, right?
In principle, yes, but it is even more a matter of showing how a whole battery of multifarious techniques concerning the education of children, assistance to the poor, and the institution of workers' tutelage are coordinated through this psychiatric order. A genealogical analysis then basically consists in going behind the institution and trying to discover in a wider and more overall perspective what we can broadly call a technology of power.
I see. So archaeology would be more what you did in your early writings, from the history of madness to the birth of the clinic and the order of things, while genealogy is more the approach of discipline and punish and the subsequent works?
Frankly speaking, genealogy has actually not been such a central concept for me. Unlike archaeology, the term does not appear in my book titles. I dealt with it mainly in an essay about Nietzsche's conception of history.
The famous text of 1971, Nietzsche, Genealogy, History?
Exactly. It was Nietzsche who, for example, spoke of the genealogy of morality. And I just tried to explain more precisely what he actually meant by that. In addition, Nietzsche had also presented an essay dealing with the use and abuse of history for life. I then had a closer look at both these texts.
That means that the kind of historiography you describe in this essay was not necessarily your own?
Well, Nietzsche was never explicitly interested in discourses or in archaeology. But nevertheless, there are obvious points of convergence. For example, in the effort not to pursue history as a consoling play of recognitions, or in the ability to laugh at the solemnities of the origin, but also in focusing on the acculturation of the body and history.
But that's not very concrete.
Well, Nietzsche wasn't an academic historian, and neither was I, actually.
Wait a minute. Then one could also make you and your work the subject of a genealogical analysis? So when you write in your essay, it was necessary to discover the truth or being does not lie at the root of what we know and what we are, but the exteriority of accidents, then this would also apply to yourself?
In principle, yes. I also write that in this perspective, the entire history of Europe appears as a parody and farce. Historians supplied the French Revolution with Roman prototypes, Romanticism with knight's armor, and the Wagnerian era was given the sword of a German hero. Ephemeral props that point to our own unreality.
But as a puppet, you don't need to point to this unreality anymore. It is obvious. As a puppet, you belong to the ephemeral props of European history, to the masquerade and concerted carnival, of which Nietzsche speaks.
Of which Nietzsche speaks, precisely. For myself, something rather different follows from the articulation of body and history. Knowledge now calls for experimentation on ourselves, perhaps even in a puppet theater. I mean, if it was well done.
Do I hear something like criticism here?